Hey Tim, how you
Owen,
doing?
I'm just fine. How are you?
A little bit worse than when we talked literally seconds ago because I knocked my coffee cup over on my desk while our lovely little intro video was playing. So I think the first myth we can bust today is that I, an adult man, can be trusted with a beverage of any kind. I'm gonna have to go
Yeah,
back to sippy cups.
yeah. You had a full minute to knock it over and clean it up again, and
I
didn't
was at
quite
least
manage.
able to go go fetch paper towels in the interim. How are you doing? Are all of your beverages topped off nicely?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm staying hydrated. It's quite warm over here, so that's
Lovely,
like
lovely. Is
glass.
that like some iced tea? What are you drinking?
This is a lemonade with sparkles. So
Oh,
yeah,
that sounds nice. That sounds nice. Yesterday, I had some some neighborhood children stop by my front door and sell me some
yep.
lemonade at a reasonable price. Although I didn't check if they had any appropriate permitting or were following any health standards. So who
Eh,
knows if the low cost of that drink may have come at a cost I'll pay later.
it is a interesting shift, of course, with folks working from home that they're no longer driving by, so they have to go walk by the doors. I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Did you ever like sell lemonade as a kid to your neighborhood or hawk any wares?
I sold I'm Dutch. I sold tulip bulbs for a while. Like
Oh,
once,
yeah, tulip bulbs. This
so
symbol of a great financial crash.
yeah, so no, that was like a yearly thing. But apart from that, no oddities there. And that was just to finance like a summer camp. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Do you do you have any tulips around where you live now?
No. I like them 11 floors up, and all the tulip fields they're all in the west of the country. So
That makes sense. That makes sense.
oh well. But yeah, no, good to be back. Good to see you. And,
Good to be
yeah.
back. Good to see you. So what do we have for news this week?
So, in terms of news, we have finally gotten a new release. Took us a little while longer than I expected, but we now have a 8.56.0, and that includes a roll up of I think 4 weeks of work. So we have like 287 tickets closed, and in this bit of effort, we have three new recipe artifacts, including the rewrite cryptography that you discussed last week, I believe. There's a rewrite dev center for folks that want to visualize where they are in their migrations on the Moderne platform. And there's a new community contributed module by Sean Sullivan for rewrite Netty. So if you want to migrate your Netty applications, that's there as well.
Sean Sullivan's someone we should have on here as a guest. He's been making high quality open source contributions
Yep.
for years at this point.
Yep.
We should chat with him.
Absolutely, and all across the board as well. Like various topics that I don't know strike his fancy once in a while, and then we'll end up with a new module. And,
Yeah.
so very pleased to have that. And there's I think 129 new recipes that have made it into this release. So if there's anything that you want to explore, then definitely go to our releases page and look over there for what's new. So then, yeah, with that, I'm still looking to do like a write up of everything that's new in there and try to fit it into 160 characters for like Blue Sky and X. But
Hmm.
there is a lot of goodness in there. There's a lot of fixes, and particularly for the Groovy parser, very helpfully contributed by a community member of ours with a GitHub handle that is 5 characters long. So it's very
Unpronounceable.
hard.
Oh.
Yeah. But it is very much appreciated to get that help with like thorough fixes there. So that's been really neat. So if you had any like projects that weren't built before, then be sure to rest assured that you're seeing more improvements today. And then yeah, so if you want to explore more, click that link that we just shared for the release notes. And then beyond that, there is an announcement that we're going to do some new trainings this upcoming month. So the 22nd and the 29th will be first an intro to OpenRewrite and then an advanced OpenRewrite course. So if you want to sign up to those, we have separate links for each of those. I'll share them in the chat as well. And then from there, you'll be able to register and then learn more about various aspects of recipe development as detailed in each of those courses. So that's I'm looking really much forward to that. It'll be something that we've been doing regularly throughout the year, typically as private events, and now we're opening it up wider. So that's been good to look forward to. And then we also have a couple of new blogs. So if you want to read how Choice et al. Has been doing their Java 21 upgrade, they I think leapfrogged from 8 to 21. So it's interesting to see their view and perspective and experiences there. So if you want to read on that, that's also a link that we've just shared in the chat. And then there's the further two articles that we have on that same blog as well. So this one on open source O2 refactoring meets AI agent to modernize fintech software at scale. This one ties in with the OSS FinTech event in London this week, where we're also attending and presenting. So if you want to know more about what's presented there, then have a look at this one. And the other one is a recap of the Gartner apps one. I think in line with what we shared last week, I believe. And we had our colleague on who gave a bit of a run through while I was saying hi to you all from Schiphol. So that's everything that is new in the past week. So a couple blogs, a new release, and the trainings to look forward to. And of course, always, if you have other things that we could highlight here, definitely chime in on the open source Slack that we have. And we'll feature it here as well.
A timely mute. You nailed it. Sometimes it can be hard. You feel the cough coming, and it can be hard to hit that mute button in time. So good, quick trigger finger there. Which I think brings us to today's kind of main topic, which is maybe common myths or misconceptions about OpenRewrite. Longtime viewers probably kind of know the score already in terms of what OpenRewrite and Moderne are and are not. So we'll keep it quick, keep it fun. But we could kind of just jump in with our first one on the subject of code formatting. People sometimes there've been tools to reformat the presentation of your code since time immemorial, and initially some people thought that OpenRewrite was just another one. And it isn't the case. Obviously, OpenRewrite can do any kind of code change, whether that is cosmetic, syntactic, semantic, or anything else that you might type with your own human fingers. You could get an OpenRewrite recipe to change for you. But I figure that while we're going through some of these, rather than just being like busted next, we can kind of show some of the relevant code for each one, so that if you wanted to know a little bit about, this could be kind of an intro to a variety of topics within the project. So I thought that I would just show everyone the kind of just a brief tour of how formatting works in OpenRewrite. So I'll just share my screen, which I should have had ready to go already. Here we go. And so in OpenRewrite, much like everything is a recipe, formatting is also a recipe. And recipes are implemented with visitors, so they tend to be implemented, well, they are visitors that actually do the work. So, for each language, there tends to be a recipe called autoformat, which you can run on its own to format your code to a particular style, or you can, or is more commonly invoked as an implementation detail of another recipe. Let's look at let's look at Java's, for example. So if we look at the Java auto format visitor, we see that it is essentially a visitor that goes and applies in sequence a whole list of other visitors. Normalized format, minimum viable spacing, blank lines, wrapping and braces, and friends. And so this is incidentally a decent example of how one can compose multiple visitors together to make a more powerful composite of all of those. And if these names kind of maybe look familiar to you, it's because we, let's say, took inspiration from IntelliJ's code style settings, and the IntelliJ default code styles closely match the OpenRewrite default code styles. Now you might notice that there are perhaps more entries in here than exist in OpenRewrite, and not all of those have been implemented yet. But if you really care about implementing some particular aspect of source code formatting, auto format visitor is where you would come to check. Now, one kind of key aspect of formatting is styles, as reasonable people can disagree about where the curly brace go or whether there should be a space between an if statement and its opening parenthesis, as Tim could famously identify my code by the lack of a space between the if statement and the opening parenthesis. Um, my argument,
Which is
incidentally,
fine.
was
Which is fine.
which is
I'll
fine.
clean it up.
Well, we've got a recipe to do that, Tim. You need to
Yeah.
dirty your own hands, muddle with those spaces. My argument was always like, hey, if parenthesis, that's just a function. We don't put a space here, so why are we putting a space? Why are we putting a space between if and the opening parenthesis? But the IntelliJ default code style disagrees with me on that, and so that's fine. Kind of but right, the styles can be can be different. Let's see, is this one? Yeah, so a style is a kind of marker that can be attached to an LST to configure these settings, right? Like, should there be where should the annotations go? Should there be a space here or not, kind of thing? And these styles can be set explicitly in a YAML document, much like a declarative recipe can. Excuse me. Or more commonly, they are auto-detected from the code at parse time. So uh, the kind of other half of formatting is auto-detection, which is a process that kind of also uses visitors to look through code and do things like keep count of what new line character is used, or keep count of how of whether spaces or tabs are used for indentation, and if it is spaces, how many spaces, these kinds of things, all in service of trying to make any code change OpenRewrite produces look as idiomatic as possible for the context that change is going to be inserted in. Which reminds me of within like a Java visitor, there is, if you need to format something, there is a convenience method on Java Visitor, and I believe most of the other visitor classes, called auto format, which will go and run auto format on whatever LST element you want to call it on. But you don't actually need to explicitly use it all that often. There's actually only like 11 results in Rewrite Java itself, and that's because the most common way this is invoked is as part of templating, right? If you're using Java template, it internally calls auto format. So most code edits are done with Java template, and they're therefore formatted under the hood with auto format. So you find yourself invoking Java template and then auto format, as I commonly see in code reviews from new recipe authors. You probably didn't need to do that one, or it might be indicative that maybe you passed the wrong cursor into the Java template, and so it had the nesting depth wrong. So it'll use the cursor to determine how far over things should be indented. So yeah, I think that's a nice little tour of the beginnings of formatting in OpenRewrite. Tim, what's our
Yeah.
next myth? Oh, or do you have anything to add to that before I rush on to the next myth, I should say?
I don't know. I was just going to say, like, it's fun to realize that it's not fully crystallized out yet. Like, I think in the past 2-3 weeks we added support for auto formatting annotations and where they
Yes.
should land on like the previous line, the next line, the same line, things like that, as
Yes.
well as the auto format for try with resources. So if you have more than one, should it be on the next line? Should it be left aligned with the previous one? Or should it be indented to match the previous one? So it's just continuing improvements there.
Yeah.
And it does bring me back to some discussions I've had here with a friend of mine, like awesome driver, who's been on the show as well. He of course works on works at Picnic on refactor recipes, but they famously have no support for formatting whatsoever. They kind of assume that you do apply an external formatter to your code, But that only goes so far. If you've spent 20 years to prep your code to a certain style, you don't quite want to reformat everything when you make a small one-to-one change. So.
Right.
But yeah, no, good to know that we support various modes of not having to configure anything explicitly at all. We'll just detect it and apply it as best we can. So,
yeah, and like Tim said, if there's something that the formatter doesn't do right, let us know or submit a patch or something, and it can always be expanded to cover more cases.
Absolutely. So yeah. So then let's move on to the next one. That's the myth that you need to write your own recipes to use it. So this is something that's come up once in a while when we have discussions with folks or when I give a presentation, is that they some tools we know don't come with any batteries included. So you might have a very fancy edit engine to do replacements with something like Aeropro, but they don't come with recipes out of the box. And that's a misconception that folks have with OpenRewrite once in a while as well. Where if you just look at the OpenRewrite/rewrite core of it, then you'll see some useful parsers and recipes already. But we've branched off a lot of utility recipes into the various modules, which I think we have some 60 plus of right now. And
yeah, they do tend to proliferate over time. Although one of the first kind of toes one could dip in creating recipes on their own is just knowing how to parameterize the existing recipes. We maybe want to show like the YAML recipe builder on the SAS for this. That's like a YAML recipe that parameterizes other recipes is it is itself a recipe. So I don't know if that might even count as as confirming. No, it's not. It's not. It doesn't confirm the myth, since there are many recipes you can run directly without filling in a single parameter. But it is true that the framework gets much more powerful if you are willing to take a recipe or two off the shelf, fill in some values, and stick them together, and call that a new recipe.
Absolutely. So let me try to get that builder going, because it is, of course, possible to customize recipes that you have. So in this case, we have our builder. It has a beautiful tree viewer that is not very hierarchical if you don't add anything to it just yet. But if you were to add any recipe here, and let's go for one that is pretty much a building block, I think, for a lot of recipes, which is change type. And I'm using the exact name here, but we can also be a little more descriptive in what we want to use. So in this case, we could use change type. And then I can give it some arguments. So we have an example quite often where folks might want to switch from one library implementation to a different one. And one use case is the string utils class that is in Spring Framework, which offers some of the functionality that is in a number of other string utils implementations. So we have our own that we use internally with a very limited set, but there's also the Commons Lang one that has a much broader set of methods that you can use to format strings in various ways. And if you want to compose your own recipe that switches between those implementations, then this is one way to go about it. So you pass in the old fully qualified type name, so the package name followed by the class name, and then the new one that you want to move to instead. And then I'm going to say ignore type definition, because we don't want to run this on the Spring projects themselves. And now we have the beginnings of a custom recipe ourselves. So we have our custom Spring Boot recipe, which does this one migration away from a Spring class onto our own internal one. And you can expand on this by, again, adding more and more recipes to it. Maybe a change package would be applicable, or adding a dependency. But this is the way you can compose parameterized recipes internally. And then every step of the way, you're able to either run it through the platform, as you can do through the button here, or edit this as a YAML recipe. And you can see the magic underneath. It's just a declarative recipe again that folks have come to know and expect when they write their own recipes. So that's quite helpful, I would say, but it's not absolutely necessary because we come with a lot of batteries included. So if you want to add maybe a Spring Boot migration, Then we have some 3,600 recipes, I think, today. Together make up the Spring Boot 3.5 best practices recipe, which we now added to the one that we had previously. So now we have 3,673 recipes to move you over to newer versions of Spring Boot. So use this builder to compose recipes, but know that there is a lot of recipes out of the box for you to work with already.
Yeah, covers a lot of the a lot of the common operations, and I just think goes kind of feeds kind of nicely into our next myth, which is that it might break my code or run unsafe transformations. And I would give this a partially true. It might break your code, right? Like if you run just that change type recipe that you showed before, and it changed dropped one class in for another class, it doesn't. If all of those classes don't have the exact same methods, or if the new implementation has a bug in it, a code change could result in build failures or test failures. Recipes are human authored programs that are deterministic in the changes they make, and can deterministically, like any other program, it could have a bug or a shortcoming or a feature that hasn't been implemented yet. So recipes are always operating on kind of a best effort basis. The idea being that if you automate 80% of a big transformation, that's a lot of value, even if it doesn't get to 100% all in one go. But that doesn't mean that there are no tools whatsoever in order to help you make sure the changes are of high quality. For example, we have this verify compilation recipe, which will probably be. I think this is going to end up becoming kind of an implementation detail of recipe runs, which does a quick check of your code to see, is everything still compiling, right? You went and changed a bunch of symbols, you went and changed a bunch of dependencies. Do those dependencies provide for all of the symbols that are now in use post refactor? So currently, you could use this by kind of tacking it on to the end of a recipe run, and seeing if that like catches any shortcomings in the transformation you're running. But I think in the future that will probably just be something that is kind of automatically part of every recipe run, so that they would end with either you're probably okay to build and run tests, or you may need to maybe a helpful list of things to go fix manually, or with the help of your favorite AI agent coming in at the end.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Yeah, although one thing about the safety of the transformations is, anyone can write any recipe that does anything, but nothing's getting into the org.OpenRewrite namespace, or the IO Moderne namespaces that we control without one of us reviewing the code. And it is all typically open source, or at least source available, so you can see for yourself what that program is going to attempt to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the core tenet of all of our recipes is to not do any harm. So when we're in doubt about making a certain code change, then we much rather choose to not make any change at all, as opposed to giving you a partial or incorrect code change.
Right.
Because when we are composing together some 3,673 recipes, we want to be able to trust the outcome of the collection and not have like a small chance that each of them add something that it shouldn't. We're also looking to add a bit to the docs. So there's a open pull request that we have that explains this concept a bit more. Like, what can you expect after running a recipe, and what could you do if you identify elements after running a recipe that is not yet done. So you can maybe choose to expand the recipe coverage, or if it's something that is very unique and hard to automate, choose to leave that part of the migration as something that you just leave it up to the end user to complete, but it's just a silly one thing in one service. So know that documentation is coming, and we're eyeing the frequently asked questions for this one, so keep an eye on that there.
Which I think
So I
brings us
think,
to our next myth. Tim, you want to talk about whether it only works on Java projects?
yeah, sure. So this is something that has historically maybe been true. Like if we were giving you a demo, let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, then yes, we had very strong coverage in Java and maybe very limited coverage beyond that, unless it was supporting technologies. Because of course, if we're gonna migrate your Java application, we're gonna update your Maven build files, your Gradle build files, all the same. And these days, even the Kotlin script files for Gradle are picked up and converted as needed to upgrade you. But we've also, as you've probably seen on the show, expanded heavily into C Sharp. We did a demo 2 weeks ago. Not only showing you the 373 recipes that we have today, but also showing you how easy it is to add additional Roslyn-based recipes there to expand, which you can control on the repositories that you're maintaining, and then standardize that across the board with the Moderne platform to do so. So, while we might have folks who say that it mostly or only works for Java, that is very much outdated knowledge because we're adding JavaScript, TypeScript as well. If you keep an eye on the OpenRewrite/rewrite repository, you'll see the languages drop in there over the past couple of months and the coming months as well. So, yeah, it's a dated myth, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, yeah, we are probably still most mature in the Java ecosystem, but adding new ones all the time. Yeah, but I just do think that kind of brings us to our next myth, which I think I'll do this one. Uses reflection or runs code to make decisions. There isn't any particular usage of reflection, this being the APIs that enable Java to inspect its own uh, code and classes and methods at runtime. This isn't really a technology that underpins OpenRewrite in any meaningful way. Although I won't say that there's no usage of reflection, but it's just one technique amongst many. Um, as for running code to make decisions, yeah, absolutely, it does. The recipes themselves are programs, and so they can have all of the capabilities that any other program has, and all of the potential pitfalls and foibles and requirements to test and to consider carefully what scenarios that code is likely to encounter are. Now, in
And
terms of making decisions, it is not typical that recipes involve any AI. They are typically deterministic programs, which are, well, I've been saying hand authored, but with the rise of AI coding assistants, maybe that isn't the phrase to use anymore. It is usually a human who produces or supervises at least the production of a recipe, which is then deterministic in the changes it makes. Although it is possible to have a recipe that invokes an LLM or uses embeddings or some of these other techniques. We have a few recipes in the catalog that do that. Although you'll never run a recipe that calls out to some external LLM without you knowing it. You would always,
yeah,
for any of
yeah,
those to work, it would always involve you first putting your API key in somewhere. So you're never going to accidentally, be calling out to OpenAI or anything like that when you run a recipe, which I think is probably the real crux of this question. But it's possible, right? We made one recipe for one of our customers in Quebec who, over time, as their files had lived through the ages and aeons and time changes, had become misencoded as different tools made different assumptions about what the character encoding of the file was, which led to a sad situation where across hundreds of thousands of files, anywhere that there was an accent mark or a diacritic, it was likely replaced with an error character. So all of their lovely French comments were marred with Unicode question marks and other assorted representations of an encoding error. and we used a language model to look at the whole comment and try to figure out, make a best guess as to what the missing piece was in order to rehydrate it with lovely UTF-8 diacritics.
So
So
yeah,
that's
it's sort of like a high school French kind of puzzle. Like there's a letter missing here. Is it an E with with a line this way or that way, or an O? And it's like I don't know, made it work. And of course, it seemed like a silly use case, but it was blocking the generation of Java doc for those
oh yeah.
modules, which then in turn leads to a bad experience when you're using such a library internally and you find that you have no documentation to help you there at all, be it in French or English or anything. So, yeah,
Indeed,
that's it.
indeed.
But yeah, no, I think it is a bit of a myth that what we do is all AI. I think it wasn't helped by us adopting the moderne.ai URL in part as
Probably
well.
muddied the waters a bit, yeah.
But you use what's available to you, and then
Yeah.
yeah, I know it's I'm at the
That's
very least glad when you compare OpenRewrite to other tools that we don't have a collection of, let's say, a dozen or so flags that you need to put in to enable reflection on the various Java versions to be able to run at all.
that's true. That's true. Although we do, since we use Java compiler internals, we did some. There's a little bit of class loading wizardry that goes on so that you don't have to do those dash dash add opens arguments
Oh,
whenever you want to use the Java 17 or 21 parsers, uh, which was like, yeah, we know that we're using Java compiler internals. We don't
yeah,
need to like tell you every time that it's okay, JDK. Like it's fine. We take responsibility. Yeah, so not really what this
yeah,
myth is about, but that is a fun little trick I could ever that we could get into if anyone was ever frustrated with their program requiring uh, that proactive kind of consent from everyone involved. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, neatly wrapped and hidden away. So yeah. And I, for one, am looking forward to. I think that Java 24 came out with a class file API,
Hmm,
which is something we could be leveraging for our Java 25 parser. And maybe at that point, there would be no need to do additional major version Java parsers anymore. But it's
maybe,
something to keep an eye on. Like, it'd be
maybe.
nice not to keep in parallel four different parsers going. I think.
Yeah, it's a bit of a maintenance headache since there ends up being a lot of excuse me, a lot of copying and pasting between the Java 8, 11, 17, and 21 implementations, which, like any
Yep.
copy and paste job, can get out of sync over time.
And I'm not looking forward to repeating that again with 25 and what goes beyond. So maybe that.
Would rather not, but hey, we'll do it if we have to.
So yeah, no, I think this myth, I think we can retire. No.
Which I think brings us to, if it pulls old libraries, my app will be vulnerable. We had a very ironic situation where the recipe modules, which were there to help you migrate off of old library versions, would themselves be flagged as containing those old libraries. And that's because, and therefore might be subject to the whims of security scanners that were complaining that the thing that was there to help you was itself part of the problem. Thankfully, this isn't as much a problem anymore as it used to be, but well, we can kind of get into why. So one, this myth was busted. It was never this was always a false positive on the part of security scanners that recipe modules like Rewrite Spring would subject you to vulnerabilities. But it's common for Java, like Java template invocations, to reference some class from, if you're migrating some Spring thing, you need a definition for that type for the Java compiler to make sense of of what it's looking at and give you a well-typed AST or LST element back. And so the easiest way to get those type definitions is from the source, which is to say, if you have a migration from Spring 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, you might have a bunch of Spring Framework jars in there providing those different versions of those type definitions. And those would be bundled into the meta INF rewrite class path directory inside of rewrite recipe modules, where they could then be loaded as a resource at runtime. And so they would get flagged by overzealous security scanners in that spot, even though that code was never going to be executed. It was there purely as reference material. It would get flagged, and probably got some of our jars on lists of various kinds, which led to us to come up with the type table format, which I think we have a way of doing this in Maven now, but the there's a way of doing this in Maven now. It used to be kind of a Gradle only thing, where you can now kind of declare. Whoops. Changing stuff without meaning to, where you can now declare recipe dependencies and get all of these as part of the build bundled into a type table file, which now lives as this class path.tsv.zip. Well, it isn't actually a zip file. It's like a G. It's like it's some other compression, right? We should probably change the extension on there.
If you make it a TG set, I think it opens as a like a CSV file.
Yeah, that sounds right. So basically, there's a part of the build process that'll go through all of these jars, download them, open up their classes, and shuck out anything that isn't the ABI, the application binary interface. All of the method signatures and class definitions, but none of the implementations, and then kind of compress that down into a compact binary format, which we can then, when the recipe is running, take that and produce a class file from it, or I guess it's not a class file, but a Java source file that, again, doesn't have the implementations for any of the methods, but does have the signatures, which is all that's relevant from a type attribution perspective. And that's what's going on in this class path from resources method. So when it says, Spring context 5, that's going to be looking for an entry in this class path tsv.zip file, which we should have the sources ready to go. Wait, I have the sources right over here. So if you're curious to know how this works, this dependencies from resources method inside of Java parser is what initiates that lookup. And you can look at this rewrite class path jar class path loader class to get even more specifically into it, where this looks at both jar files inside of this directory as well as the kind of like TSV file. Or actually, that one doesn't look at the TSV file. This. It's type table from class path that looks at the TSV file. So if you're curious about how these type tables work, take a look at this type table class within the main OpenRewrite repository, and you can see how it is encoded and produced and all of that good stuff.
No. And I've shared some links in the chat as well. It's part of the type tables, and we indeed these days support Maven all the same. It's just there's an additional goal in the Maven plugin that we developed to curate those tables for you, and then you leverage them in your recipes. And I think we've pretty much cleared that out every place we could, except for 1 or 2 Spring jars, which I think meta annotated with some Spring annotations, but we're still needing to make part of that type table that we have. So that's good to be able to not have to explain anything there and not have to get our jars approved through any systems, just because we needed those signatures to be able to move you away from fraudulent code. So pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can do a couple more. Let me see which one we have.
Yeah, take a pick of a myth you feel like busting, Tim.
So I like this one because it's a common misconception for folks that start out with OpenRewrite, because they'll tend to come to the project via our Java upgrades or Spring upgrades, and then only use it once every 6 months, once every year maybe, and then there's even been cycles where I see folks show up in the open source Slack every time there's a new Spring Boot release, and then you don't hear from them for another 5 months, which is a bit of a waste, because there's so much more you could be doing with recipes that folks just aren't aware of. So some of my personal favorites are like switching, not in terms of versions from one upgrade to another, but switching between implementations. So you can switch from one vendor to another, or one assertion library to another. Big fan of AssertJ, and getting folks onto that one through OpenRewrite recipes has been a bit of a I don't know, weekend hobby of mine. And then of course there's a lot more things like that also started out as like a passion project with phasing out feature flags, something that you can do pretty much every week, every month, every sprint that you completed something, and you want to clear out the ones that you did 3 months ago. That is something a recipe is a perfect fit for, and we have those available to you to really go beyond or simple upgrades of one version to the next every 6 months or so. So, any favorites of yours that similarly come to mind when we talk about this?
Yeah, totally. I mean, some of it is just the kind of ongoing kind of code health and quality things, like auto formatting the style of the code. Like, I don't care what the style is. Like, I agree that it should be consistent. So, but I don't want to debate it. I don't want to hear about it in the code review. So just make a program that does it, and everyone runs that, and everybody's happy. Kind of a similar thing with like common static analysis issues. If you have little coding anti-patterns, or even big coding anti-patterns to avoid. One challenge of being like a senior or principal engineer within a large organization is you might have specialized knowledge about something you use, Zookeeper, Kafka, whatever. Like, don't use it this way. Like, this causes a problem. It looks fine. It might be in a Stack Overflow answer. It might be coming. Your a coding assistant might be suggesting this particular usage, but for various reasons, it's problematic. And so, you could spend. I've definitely been in the position of like beating a drum. Hey, everyone, do it this way. Hey, everyone, don't do it this way. And everyone's got a lot of stuff going on in their time and in their heads, and so you never reach 100% recognition on that message. And so if you're trying, and so anti-patterns have a way of creeping back in, unless you make a recipe that banishes that anti-pattern and run it on kind of a regular basis. So I think automation is some of the least annoying way to maintain a high code standard without having to sit there like a hawk on every code review, being like, not like that, not like that, not like that, and cannot have such free you from having kind of a nagging relationship with your coworkers.
Yeah, and I think that it also helps indeed keep that friction low, and it's something that we do continuously. So we have our set of recipes that we run on every PR, and then I think last week we added one, and I'll share a quick tab here as well. And here you can see how we added one for, in this case, it's a perfect refactor style recipe, which Sam, you'll recognize this pattern. If you wanted to check that a literal had a value that was null, in the old days, you'd do first that instance of cast for your expression, and then check the value and if it's actually null. And of course, recently we made it possible to just call a method to do that same check. That method already existed, but it didn't accept the null value. And then when we added that, you can try to tell everyone within a growing company and OpenRewrite community or you write a recipe, which took me all of 2 minutes, and then you enforce it, run it everywhere, and now a bot does that, commenting suggestions for me, such that I never have to look at that again.
I've written that first line of code about probably 100 times, and I've seen it, 1,000 times. So that's a good one, Tim. Very nice.
Oh, and it's if you start to think of a tool in this way, where like how can I use it to reduce friction and force standards, then it's very much not something that you use every 6 months, but something that you can probably use every day.
Yeah, or at least I think it's a good idea if you're not running these kinds of code standard recipes on like every commit or every pull request, then at least run them on like a weekly basis or something like that. So I think maybe we'll do one more, which is large refactors are impossible without a monorepo, and this is one that I would say that kind of used to be true or used to be approximately true in that if you had a multi-repository environment, um, propagating change across those mini repositories is much more difficult, or at the very least, much more deliberate. That you have to, in a mono repo, if you're bumping the version of Jackson, data bind that's in use everywhere, that might be updating a single file and watching that propagate to hundreds or thousands of projects more or less instantaneously. And then in a multi-repository environment, one of the kind of scenarios that led to the genesis, the birth of OpenRewrite was, Jonathan, when he was still at Netflix, being responsible for like I think it was like a Guava upgrade. They had some library they needed to upgrade everywhere for security purposes, and they found that with all of the different repositories they had and all different mixes of dependency versions, it was practically impossible to get this done in any kind of timely fashion. And so, if you want to bring, which like it could be an advantage to have control over the propagation of changes, right? Like I've worked in big monorepo environments where like people breaking the build or checking in code that even if it wasn't a build break caused like some kind of operational problem in services and such well downstream of where they were working, where those kinds of breakages were a major pain in everyone's ass and a major kind of like drain on the overall productivity of the organization, which had a lot of people clamoring for a more multi-repository environment for breaking up the monolith. And people talked about it and made efforts to it for years and struggled to it, as monoliths tend to have a bit of a kind of inescapable gravity of their own. But that's maybe neither here nor there. But that's kind of why it can be so important to have something like Moderne for operating effectively in a multi-repository environment. One way of thinking about the ability to run a recipe and get changes made across dozens or hundreds of repositories kind of all at once is that you can then bring back the consistency, bring back the ability to propagate change rapidly throughout many repositories when you want it, right? And you can kind of have the best of both worlds. When it's important or when you desire to propagate a change everywhere rapidly, you can. And when you want the more deliberate control of when upgrades happen or when something maybe dangerous or fiddly is rolled out, then you can proceed more incrementally. I kind of suspect that in the future we won't talk about monorepos versus multi-repository setups very much, as tooling will erode the differences between them, right? You can have monorepos with toolings to prevent change from propagating when you don't want it to, and you have multi-repository environments with tooling to allow change to propagate when you do want it to. And so I think you'll eventually come to a convergent sort of state where whether the code is in one repository or many, it works out to be about the same developer experience either way. Um, as long as you have something like Moderne. If you don't, then it is going to continue to make a big difference for your developer productivity, exactly how you have your code arranged.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is very nice to have these tools and have it be something that trivial. The moment that you think of it, you can phase it out and enforce it going forward, and never have to think of it again. And that means no one in the company has to think of it again. So,
It's
really,
one of the I love so much that you can use it to cognitively unburden yourself of a piece of knowledge, right? Like
yeah.
once it's in a recipe, you don't need to think about it anymore. That frees up space to think about other things.
Oh. I recall like at the Code Remix summit that we had just a month ago. We had a discussion with Kurt Clover, who they have a system within his company where you can add an annotation to a method to say that you want to have that inlined, as in replaced with whatever the argument of the annotation is. And that is the last time that they have to think of it. Because at that point, automation takes over, starts to find any place where you're using a method that is annotated with that replacement indication, and then phases it out all over the place. And then once done, circles back, removes the annotated method. And that is how you want to, like I said, the very last time you think about it is when you add that annotation. And that is what we can offer with Moderne, all the same.
Yeah. Huh.
It's
That
just,
feels like a pretty good set of myths to have tackled. We could probably approximately kind of call it there for today, unless there was a final myth or anything you wanted to touch on, Tim.
yeah, I think it's nice to have these from time to time. So I think we
Yeah,
can keep a couple, I don't know, tuck away for if we
keep
want to
keep
do
keep a
another
couple in
session like this.
reserve. Yeah,
So,
good plan.
yeah,
Well, Tim, as always, it's been a pleasure hosting the weekly code remix stream with you, and glad that we got that release out with all of those fixes and improvements. So everyone be sure to check out that 8.59.0. Lots of good stuff in there.
absolutely, absolutely. And then of course we're already looking forward to next week where we'll have a friend of the show, Shannon, on to talk about performance and Gradle builds and best practices that you can apply there. So
Absolutely.
really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah, Shannon is a real Gradle expert. So if you've ever been frustrated or annoyed with your Gradle build and wanted to do something about it, and aside from just complain, although complaining can be a lot of fun, then tune in and we'll go through some tips and best practices.
And I think he even has a PR open on OpenRewrite to speed up our builds by a couple minutes. So
I have
if
no doubt
you
that that's something Shannon would do. I should go take a look at that PR.
so yeah, look forward to that, and then you'll hear all about the upgrades next week. So
Nice.
with that, thanks all, and hope to see you then. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye bye.